Hi friends, welcome back to my garden. I am so excited to show you my July garden tour. This is still on the earlier half of July and the plants are just growing so fast. I am so excited to see my arched area of the garden beginning to get covered. My potatoes, this little bed that ended up being mixed with quite a few things, are really taking off, and I just want to walk you through the garden and show you what's growing. This little bed where I decided to put potatoes this year ended up having a few other things fill in. There's some squash, there's some sweet potato, and along the edges there's kale. This bed overall is thriving, and I plan to dig it up when the potatoes are ready. I can see that there are a few edges that got a little bit sunburned, but I think the reason that this bed is thriving so well is it does get shade in the heat of the day, so it's a little bit protected from our intense afternoon sun. The kale at this stage is great as baby kale used in salads, and we also like to saute it with eggs in the morning. I built this trellis last year from scrap wood out of necessity. I really needed a place for my beans to climb, and I got a pretty good harvest, enough for planting the seeds this year and a little bit more. So I have them again climbing in the same area. I added compost to the soil, and I can see it paid off because these plants have grown so tall to exceed the top of the trellis, and currently they're getting filled with flowers. So I'm so excited the next week or so to have long beans. They're asparagus long beans is what I planted, but I did have two different varieties come out of the seed packet. There was a purple long bean and an asparagus long bean. So honestly, we will see what we get this year. It's a little bit fun to end up getting a hybrid that has grown in your own yard because it's acclimated to your soil and your climate conditions. Our little microclimate in our backyard now has long beans that are more adapted to our climate. So I am thrilled to pick some. We ate them as green beans, cut up and sauteed into meals, and also just fresh right off the vine. They're delicious. Because we love these beans so much, I decided to plant them in a few other places in the garden. I also put them at each corner of our arched trellis area, and so they're growing up and over the top. My two corners that get a little bit more shade are growing steadily but not quite flowering yet. The one that gets most sun all day long has flowers all over it and is beginning to sprout little tiny beans. I adopted a lot of food forest ideas and methods even within my garden area, and just planting these throughout and allowing them to climb up is a benefit to us, because if one plant gets diseased or attacked by a pest, it's probably not going to be my entire crop that is lost to whatever that issue is. So there are other things that I spread throughout the garden. I'll show you that along the way. But to me, it's a great benefit to have things scattered throughout the garden. This is about 4 of the long bean plants that I put in the sunniest location, and they are thriving. Next year, I will be sure to put all of these plants in full sun. This is one of the buds that the long beans grow from. They grow in little pairs. So when this bud flowers, it will send 2 beans out. Hopefully, that's what usually happens. And when those beans are picked, 2 more will grow from the same place. It's been amazing to watch. can see in this area of the arch trellis, I have loofah and long beans twining together. And this is where the loofah starts. So I'm going to show you, I have loofah planted in 2 different places of the garden. One is over here in this full sun area. It's absolutely loving it. This plant is a little bit slow to start, but after it starts climbing, the leaves are huge and the tendrils just keep reaching for more places to grab onto. I'm so excited to see little loofahs hanging down from my arch trellis here. And if you are wondering what I mean by loofah, it grows into a loofah gourd when it's fully mature and can be used as a sponge. If you pick the fruit early, you can eat it like cucumber or zucchini. And we did grow this last season, but sadly we didn't have quite the abundant harvest that I was expecting. This plant loves full sun and the heat of the summer. You can see I also have it along the fence in this full sun area, and so I expect to have a good harvest this year. It needs a long season and the full heat of our hot zone 9B summer. This is our wild asparagus patch. We planted these from crowns about 4 years ago. And so this year it did give us quite a good amount of asparagus to enjoy. But this is the time of year when the skinny little asparagus sprout up and need to fern out to collect energy to feed the crowns to prepare for next season. This is honestly one of my favorite plants in the garden. It is our Seminole pumpkin. Last year I grew this and loved it, and we did get to harvest a few Seminole pumpkins. I tried just one vine and it grew and branched off and made such an impressive pumpkin vine, but we didn't get a great harvest because we did have an unseasonable freeze in the beginning of February, I think. So this is my second round at this vegetable, and I'm amazed. Both of the vines are just thriving. I actually have 3 plants of this, and I expect that to be plenty for our winter squash harvest. My 2 winter squash varieties that I planted this year are Seminole pumpkin and spaghetti squash, and I planted them quite far apart. So this is like a hot weather butternut squash. It has an orange creamy flesh, and I am so excited to be able to preserve some of these to eat through the winter, and I am just enjoying the process of these beautiful plants growing. Seminole pumpkins are native to Florida and have been called tree pumpkins because these vines will climb trees and then have the pumpkins hanging down. There are no trees over here in this part of my garden, so we won't experience that, but we will let the vines sprawl out and root into the ground to kind of protect them from any attacks of pests later in the season. Now I'm showing you 5 different tomato plants that I have spread throughout my garden. I decided not to do a big bunch of tomatoes like I've done in the past because with our heat and humidity, we often have pretty severe blight and other pest issues with tomatoes. This year I took a food forest approach by spreading them throughout the garden, and 2 of the plants gave us fruit early in the season. We had one Roma and one black plum tomato that were fruitful and then kind of shocked by the heat of summer. They are having some new growth. The other plants I started from seed and transferred them into the garden. They're steadily growing and I expect to have a fall harvest from them. This is one of those trial and error kind of things that I'm trying out with our particular climate to see what can give us the best harvest. This area looks very similar to our long beans, but these are cowpeas. They're a variety of a black-eyed pea. This is actually the pink-eye purple hull cowpea, and we had quite a good little harvest of them last year. I don't think I planted more than 8 or 10 plants last year, and this year I have somewhere between 20 and 25. And I intend to pick cowpeas and cook them throughout the season and then have a good harvest of dried cowpeas at the end of the season. This has been a new food for us to enjoy from our garden, but we love legumes of all types, so whether it's beans or peas, we've been able to enjoy them. And since these are so heat tolerant, they're often grown in the south, we can grow them very well in our climate. I'm loving seeing the little pairs of cowpeas come on, and you see many of them are green. When this particular variety is ready to be picked fresh and young, it gets a little bit of purple, some purple streaking on the green hull of the cowpea. When it is fully ripe and drying to be saved dry, the hull will turn mostly purple, quite dark, and so it's easy to stand out against the vibrant green leaves. This one is almost ready to pick. I'm waiting for a little purple streaking to show up on there. And then you can either eat them fresh, kind of like green beans, but you can also shell them and cook the peas inside, similar to how you would cook any kind of dry bean, and they're very delicious. Now I'm going to the inside area of my tunnel, and I have 4 little pepper plants that are a very special pepper to me. These are the New Mex Big Jim chilies, and they're a New Mexico green chili. I was born in New Mexico, and my heart will always be with New Mexico chilies, so I love growing them in my garden. These seeds were a gift from a cousin of mine, and they are thriving in our climate. We have 1 chili on the plant right now and a whole bunch of little flowers and buds, so I'm so excited to see what comes of this. I'm going to give this chili a couple more days to grow a little bit more. I have just loved this netted tunnel area I have made. It serves 2 purposes. The net keeps the birds out when the plants are young, and they can grow and thrive without being pecked to death by all of our little birds we have on this migration route. But it also becomes a trellis which all of our climbing things can just climb up. I love seeing the cucumbers climb and reach over. They're getting to the midway point of the trellis, and I'm so excited to see the cucumbers hanging down. We did this last year in the sunnier side of the trellis, and they definitely struggled and became bitter early on. So this year I planted them in the area that gets shade in the heat of the day, and the plants are really thriving. I would say the leaves are 1/3 to double the size of the leaves that we had last year. The plants look really happy and healthy and are filling with flowers. This is the gray zucchini patch, a heat-tolerant variety of zucchini that is native to Mexico. This was planted all from seeds that I saved last year, and I did have 3 different varieties of zucchini in my garden last year to try out. This was the one that thrived. So I'm a little curious to see if we have in fact developed a landrace variety of zucchini, because if I planted seeds that were pollinated by another type of zucchini, we may have a crossbreed of either a yellow squash, a zucchini, and the gray zucchini. Come to think of it, I didn't have any fruit from my Black Beauty zucchini last year, but we did have a few of the male flowers, so this is a possibility. As far as I can tell, these plants are thriving this year. They're filled with male flowers, and I'm seeing a few female flowers with the fruit beginning to put on. So I'm excited to see if that fruit will set. This should grow through the heat of our summer, and the plant is thriving. One thing I did this year in the tunnel area of the garden was the deep mulch that you would do in a food forest, and I can see it's beginning to break down, but it has definitely done its work to cover the ground, providing extra coolness for the roots and water retention, as well as nourishment for the plants. I'm excited to see these plants thrive and expecting them to give me fruit in the next couple weeks. This corner of the garden is my little herb area. I had initially just planted herbs like basil, Cuban oregano, and mint over in this corner, which is what I had last year. But there are a few other things that wound up growing here. This is amaranth. It is going to grow with a beautiful bloom of cascading seeds that hang down, and I hope to gather a lot of amaranth seeds to eat. It's similar to quinoa, and it's something that we had eaten in the past from the store, and I would love to learn how to grow and save our own amaranth. There's also a volunteer tomato tucked in here, some green onions, and a volunteer pumpkin vine. This is a traditional large pumpkin, and it's grown from a pumpkin we grew last year that I thought was completely immature and had no fertile seeds, and I gave it to my chickens. Well, there was apparently at least one seed in there that was viable because I have this beautiful pumpkin vine growing, and I'm not sad about it. It's doing its job of shading the delicate herbs and the ground, keeping this little area cooler and allowing the herbs to thrive. Now, as you can see, the sun has fully risen and it is a beautiful morning in the food forest. It's getting a little warm out here, so I'm taking a last look and I'm going to head inside. If you have any questions for me about my garden, my food forest, my chickens, which you see and maybe could hear in the background, leave them below and I'd love to answer them either in the comments or in a future video. Thanks so much for joining me for this one. I'll see you next time.